Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spanning the Need. Tonight, we're going to talk about life, food, and politics. To do that, a good friend of mine, former Ohio State Senator, Minority Leader, Executive Residence at American University School of Public Affairs, and the cookbook author who just released her cookbook, United We Eat, the Honorable Capri Cafaro. Capri, Thank you for joining me tonight. It's always a pleasure to see your face.
I'm always happy to join, sure.
And when we talk about, and we'll get into the cookbook thing, it just makes me hungry.
Well, it's close to dinner time, so if you haven't eaten already, you're going to have to after the show.
Exactly, and now that, and that's a lot to say, and you've done a lot just from where you were, and you're originally from Ohio. And
I'm sitting here right now, dude.
Oh, you're in, okay, that's even better. And the nice thing about it is your hometown, Youngstown, Ohio. You've been on a variety of shows. You've done a lot in the community. Tell us kind of how you got started with everything to where you are now.
Sure. Well, it's kind of funny because I've actually never thought about this until right this second. So I always say that my path into public service was very much influenced by my grandfather on my mother's side, who was a World War II veteran and a small business guy and built highways here and was actually the site contractor for General Motors of Lordstown. But he always was a hero to me in many ways, as someone who, I remember when I wrote a report on World War II, and I was at my grandparents' house, and I said, oh, I'm writing something on the Battle of the Bulge. And I went and got an encyclopedia off the shelf. And for anyone that forgot about those, they did exist once upon a time. and so he told me, put it away. I was in the Battle of the Bulge. Anyway, why do I go and rewind all of this? My grandfather got Alzheimer's. It's what, influenced me to focus my career specifically in health policy, commit myself to public service. And obviously coming from the Mahoning Valley and having this view, I was born not very long after the collapse of the steel mills, Black Monday, all of that. And so I always heard about what was, and always felt that, what is the best way that we can improve the lives of others. And I always felt the government was that way. So my grandfather in many ways influenced my path into public service, my choice in concentrating my efforts in health policy. And then my grandmother, also my mother's mother. So this is all my mother's parents, the Silvestris. And so she is how I learned how to cook. So, and so I would be making stuff, whether it was pizzelles or, whatever, lasagna, bonbon cookies with my grandmother, but also, she, also made all of the American classics. So I guess ultimately I owe this entire circuitous affair to my grandparents, George and Elvira Silvestri.
And you talk about pizzelles. I'm Italian, 100% Italian. Me and my wife love pizzelles.
Oh, I have a burn on my arm actually from my pizzelle iron from Christmas 2 years ago. This is what happens when you're trying to. I now have an electric iron. My grandmother, she had the one that you actually had to hold and flip.
The old school one.
The old school one, which is really brutal and very hard. But it takes a long time to make a lot of pizzelles. So that one singular iron that you have to flip over the stove. But no question that my Italian-American heritage has absolutely influenced my work ethic, my commitment to community, and certainly my love of food and bringing people together through it.
And that's funny because so my grandma used to make pizzelles like no other. My mother-in-law makes really good pizzelles, and she's probably going to like me for saying that.
There, for sure.
Yeah, and so they're just pizzelles. I could sit there and just eat them and not eat dinner, lunch, or breakfast in a day.
Now do you do anisette or do you do vanilla and lemon? What do you guys do?
I don't know. She just puts it in front of me.
Fair enough. Well,
yeah.
We do pretty explicitly anisette, so that licoricey taste.
Yeah, and that actually brings it. We talk about that, but you're originally from Youngstown, Ohio, where that is a huge heritage of Italians.
Oh yeah. This brings up something also kind of interesting. So one of the other food related things I'm doing, I have a new podcast / radio show on something called the Heritage Radio Network, which has been around for about a decade. And they focus explicitly on food related audio content. And so I have a new show there called Eat Your Heartland Out, which is about the intersection of food and culture in the American Midwest. I bring this up because I think this week's episode, I recorded most of them already, so I don't know which ones they put out, but I think this week's episode is the one about Southern European immigrants, and this episode specifically is Italians and Greeks. So there's a little bit of discussion about the cookie table, a lot of discussion about obviously the role of the industrial Midwest in Youngstown, and the presence of Italian Americans in our community here in the Mahoning Valley. I am not from Youngstown. I'm from Liberty / Trumbull County, 5 generations of Trumbull County, but Youngstown and Warren is all the same thing, I guess. And I never actually represented Mahoning. I was Trumbull, Asheville, and Geauga.
Yeah, you were a senator for the state of Ohio. So tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into politics after you became graduated. You came back and just kind of started that way.
Sure. Basically, I had always, as I said, I had always had this, I guess, goal or aspiration to come back and serve my community as a public servant. I'd spent time. I have a master's degree dealing with focused in international affairs. But I ended up not using that, obviously. But I had always thought that I wanted to come home and serve my community. As some of you may know, I started where I have my policy knowledge, particularly when I started out, was in federal policy. So, I rolled the dice essentially and ran for Congress when I was barely constitutionally eligible to do so. Figured what could go wrong. The worst that could happen is I lose the primary. I actually won the primary, lost the general, expected to lose the general, but that sort of set the stage and certainly provided me with a lot of very unique insights and experiences from a campaigning perspective and a nuts and bolts perspective to bring to sort of the next round, which ultimately just 2 years later was the state Senate. So my successor in 2006 was elected Attorney General. That opened a vacancy. The way that the Ohio Constitution works, vacancies are filled by appointment. So I was appointed to fill the unexpired term, which was 2 years, then stood for election in 2008 and 2012. And then Ohio has constitutionally mandated term limits. So I've been out of office since 2016, which is why I'm now on faculty at American University and their School of Public Affairs in DC, where I continue to focus my efforts on health policy. I have a number of visiting fellowships at international institutions, again, related to my work in health policy. And then I'm still very involved locally here at home in Trumbull County with seniors and with victims of domestic violence, as well as higher ed, being on the board of Youngstown State University. So still very engaged in the community, but no longer involved in politics, so to speak, which is totally fine by me.
Yeah, and you bring Youngstown State, which is a huge institution in the Mahoning Valley, and it really does a lot for our community. And Coach Tressel and President Tressel now are doing an exceptional job during this pandemic. And you talk about doing a lot of stuff in the community. You've done variety, sat on boards. You've also done a lot of philanthropy. You've done a lot of charity events. And actually, we talked a little bit earlier before we got on about you played at the Eastwood Field at the time, a charity softball game, and we thought we would be to show you the picture of her playing in the softball game.
Oh my God!
It's a little hard here. There we go.
Okay, you don't have to make it any bigger. It's all good. I can see it. That's hilarious. That was actually a blast. And I have to say again, Tony, you always were, you have always put the community, the Mahoning Valley, first in your work. And the softball game for Hope is no different. And so I was honored to have an opportunity to participate in that. I think that was back in 07 or 08. It was early in my tenure, if I'm not mistaken. So, but
Yeah,
good times, and it's
you guys won because that was
it was Trumbull versus Mahoning. That's right.
Yes, it was Trumbull versus Mahoning, and then we had I forget who your coach was. I think it was Jim Graham at the time.
Jim Graham.
And Beatrice was on the other end and tried to buy runs. I don't know if you're, but it was a good time to play on it.
People, it's a charity game.
Yeah, it's a charity, exactly. And the nice part about it is it's all for a good cause. Number one, number two, it gets very competitive,
right?
And you're playing at a first-class facility, single A baseball that's a Cleveland Indians facility. We hope they never leave because it's such.
I agree. We love the Scrappers. We love Scrappy, and if I ever get a dog, I'm naming it Scrappy. So
hey, there is nothing wrong with that. So now you're teaching. You love what you do. You're one of special guests on Fox a lot of times during that, and then now we come to this pandemic. So what have you been doing during this pandemic?
Well, for the first 2 months, I was actually locked down in DC. Teaching remotely. They essentially, because American University is in DC. So I was teaching child and family policy. And we were scheduled to come back from spring break, and they basically extended that and put us all through a bunch of training to get geared up to teach online. They did I will say the administration did an excellent job. So I was teaching online. I was doing some, remote television. At the time, Fox was, mostly sort of shifted their focus to guests that were medically related. So I wasn't doing as much Fox, but was still doing some television, sort of finishing up the process of gearing up for this cookbook. I recorded pretty much all of the episodes for this new radio show online in the and so basically and then whatever anybody else is doing. I mean, who knows? It's I guess I tried very hard, and it's not something that I advertise, I guess, but I did do what I could as far as trying to get PPE to folks in the Valley. So I commissioned somebody out in Tremont up in Cleveland to help make masks and gowns that we tried to get out to a couple of the hospitals up in Ashtabula County, as well as St. E's Oncology Unit. And then I started doing online counseling sessions, volunteer kind of sessions for Someplace Safe, which is our domestic violence shelter. I'm on their advisory council. I'm also a licensed social worker. So I'm continuing to do that to this day. Usually once a week, I try to, do some sort of virtual one-on-ones, volunteering with individuals that are in shelter right now at Someplace Safe, trying to utilize my my social work skills. So, trying to do my best from afar in the pandemic.
Well, I think when once kind of April and May came around, it was like all hands on deck.
Yep.
And I mean, I know working at the time at the university, same thing, all hands on deck, and all the hospitals were the same.
Yep.
And it's funny that now we think that we can beat this, and now all the cases are going up, and the governor of Ohio just made an announcement with Minnesota and everything like that. Wear a mask now. It's going to be mandated starting tomorrow night. And I've been wearing a mask. Me and my wife and I have been wearing masks. We feel that that's the best option, no matter if you tell us to or not.
Absolutely. Well, my sister is immunocompromised. So while, she and I live in totally different places, I'm very cognizant of that. She's actually now staying with me over the summer because she lives in New York. So she literally did not leave her apartment for 14 weeks.
Oh.
And because as she described it, she was worried about the pig pen cloud that was coronavirus anywhere that you would go in Manhattan. So, and even though she's young, I mean, she's 36, that's still a frightening concept. So, we had always been wearing masks and gloves, and so we're very vigilant. So now she's hanging out here and, at my house over throughout the summer, which, is a lot more room and a lot more places to roam than New York. You can easily get curbside anything, and so it's a much safer alternative. And hopefully now with the mask mandate, we'll see our cases get in check here in Ohio. New York seems to be, trending appropriately, but certainly in the city of New York, when you have so many people in such confined environment, it's incredibly difficult to socially distance. So I don't know how they're going to continue to maneuver through that. And as we approach the school year all across the country, that's kind of the next frontier here is now what?
Well, and I think that's a big question. And I think the problem, and this is just me personally, is problem with educational K to 12 is there's no set across the board. Everyone's doing their own thing, and there's no one providing information to them enough. If you go to one school, it's the totally opposite of what the next school district is. And I think that's a problem.
It's a challenge. I mean, look, and I say this as a former state legislator, but I think a lot of people feel like this, that school district level decisions are often best decided at that school district level. However, dealing with a communicable disease, and that's the difference. So we're not just dealing with, and with whatever kind of situation that you want to deal with your school district, getting the parents and teachers involved and the superintendent, the school board, and making those local decisions is very important. And I think that we wouldn't necessarily see. We do have statewide mandates in education now, certainly. But, we are used to having local control and individual freedoms. And I think that is where this challenge has come in this pandemic, where, at our core, we are both of those things. We, feel like we're all autonomous. We have, the freedom to do what we want, to make our own decisions. But when our own decisions and our own conduct impact others, that's when things shift and they change. And so, I do hope that people heed the call and are responsible and realize the gravity of the situation of the pandemic. Look, nobody wants to wear a mask. Nobody likes it. Who cares? It's about consideration for others. Almost before yourself oftentimes, particularly for those of us that are younger, and people say, oh, you're not in a risk group. Well, people are dying in their 30s and 40s too, even children. So, you gotta care about others. It's about protecting the community.
Yeah, it's protecting yourself as well. Like you said, you have a sister that has a kind of an immune system that you want to keep safe.
Yep.
And that's a big thing. Yeah. And you want, and it is nice that she can get out of a small apartment and back home, back with you, and kind of move around a little bit, just a little bit bigger. Yeah. But it gives some sense of relaxation, because you're probably not in that confined area where you got 10 million people within 50 miles.
You can go out in the yard any day, anytime, whereas you're like stuck in New York, you're stuck. And so, I think sometimes too, when those of us that are, in the suburbs or the country, however you want to say it, in places like Ohio, maybe we take that a little bit for granted, that, well, it's just our family. It's our nuclear thing. We got, our yard, we have our house, we have our car. We don't have to rely on public transportation. If somebody gets sick, maybe they can go in a spare bedroom and you can leave stuff outside the door for them. People in bigger cities don't have that luxury. But it doesn't really matter, because, again, everybody is at risk. Whether you are at a big city or a small town, urban or rural, we're all at risk. And I think that the American public is getting wind of that. And I'm very glad to see, again, at least personally, I know that not everyone agrees, but personally, I'm very glad to see Governor DeWine finally, after his stern talking to last week, I think he was like, look, Ohio.
Like a parent's talking to their kid.
Exactly. You're going to be grounded. And they didn't listen. So now Ohio's grounded with the mask.
And it's funny, the comments I got from online that said, I said, please interpret what the governor just said. Well, just father, son, daughter speak about what you did, what you're doing wrong and what you should be doing. Yep. Or if you don't do this, I'm going to punish you. And I think politically, he tried everything he could to get people to do it without making it mandated.
Yep, he did. I think he did. And I think it's a, it's a fine line, particularly in Ohio, I think, and there are certainly very vocal members of the General Assembly that have been anti-mask. There's been protests, that sort of thing. But Governor DeWine was praised early on nationally for his rapid and decisive approach to trying to deal with this virus. And again, a lot of people thought to themselves, well, Ohio, nobody comes here. We don't know any, but people aren't coming from China. What are you talking about? It's not going to affect us. It's just going to be in the coast. It's over here in Seattle, or it's here in New York. And so I think that it was very, prescient, and I think, really proactive on behalf of Governor DeWine to recognize that just because Ohio is not on a coast, doesn't mean that we're less vulnerable. And, he really stemmed the tide there. And hopefully, again, fingers crossed that our cases will now trend in the right direction again.
And we actually, at the beginning, you were praising Governor DeWine at the beginning, because a lot of people were. And you also had Dr. Amy Atkin, who actually is a Liberty grad.
That's right, 1984.
Yeah, Liberty grad, and people threaten her life. Are you kidding me?
I know.
And she brought that mom, or that thing that, like, comfort.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people did. And what data you get is what you get. I mean, it changes every day with the disease and the pandemic.
I mean, and particularly in the early days of this, nobody knew what the hell was going on. Let's be honest. Yeah. So, trying to figure out and learn on the job is where, how is this thing spread? Oh, it's only spread by, is it just spread by touch? Now people are asymptomatic, and they can spread it. When that changed, when we figured out that you could not have symptoms and spread the virus, that's what changed the whole thing. I mean, we originally were told, oh, you have to have a fever, you have to have this, you have to have that. The different types of symptoms meandered, the way that it was transmitted we were learning more about. So, we as a society globally, as well as the individual policy and epidemiology leaders, were all sort of learning on the job. Even those with the greatest expertise were trying to crack the Rubik's Cube in real time, which is, a race against time, given how fast COVID-19 is spreading.
Well, and I think that brings a great point, is now in the early stages, we have a shutdown. Now we're opening up in phases, but now cases are starting to skyrocket. So we're in this pandemic where, hey, no one wants to go out anymore. So what is the biggest thing that brings everything together? Food.
That's right.
And I think you did something that was really unique, and you started a cookbook. It's United We Eat, and basically you explain a little bit about your book.
Sure. So this was actually an idea that was born of my experience in the state Senate, when I would work across the aisle with folks. And when we would have a legislative victory, I would bring in a pie and bring our offices together in a way to build camaraderie. And so I thought to myself, what better way to do two things: show that food is a uniter to bridge the gap, and bring people together regardless of political affiliation and ideology, but it also can tell a story without words. And so the objective is twofold in this book. One, as I said, to show that food is a unifier politically, regardless of whether you're left or right. And the other is to tell our nation's story through those dishes. So we have, there are 50 recipes in the book. There are 50, all 50 states are represented, including the District of Columbia. And there's actually, totally randomly, 2 recipes from Maryland. And this is actually kind of a funny story. So there's actually 52 recipes, even though it says 50 recipes, because it just sounds better. But there's 52 because it's 50 plus DC. And then we had 2 from Maryland because Michael Steele, who's the former Republican National Committee chair, was actually born and raised in DC. And when he agreed to submit a recipe for the book, I thought he was going to submit for DC. He submitted for Maryland because he was also the former lieutenant governor of Maryland. I had already gotten a recipe for crab cakes from the chairman of the Maryland Democratic Party, Kathleen Matthews, who's actually former MSNBC host, Chris Matthews' wife, I was her intern like 25 years ago in DC when she was an anchor on the ABC affiliate in Washington. And she's also a Stanford alumni along with myself. So she was the first person to give me a recipe. So I went out and I solicited recipes from Democrats and Republicans. There's about 24 recipes from current and former political leaders in this book. Ohio was represented by our own Tim Ryan.
What did he make?
He actually, this is another funny story. He gave me a zucchini and eggs recipe. Now that might sound super random, but this is kind of funny too, because he submitted his grandmother's pasta fazool recipe. But the problem was that Patrick Kennedy from Rhode Island also had already submitted pasta fazool because of Rhode Island. And obviously Patrick is Irish. The state of Rhode Island has a big Italian-American population. And so most of the current and former elected officials and political leaders that submitted, they either submitted some kind of a family recipe that oftentimes was still related to the state or something that was evocative of that state's culture. So Patrick gave me this, pasta fazool recipe. So I went back to Tim and I was like, please, dude, can you help me out? Because I started to divide, once I was getting the recipes, I was dividing them up into categories. And then I started to fill in. I adapted the remaining 26 recipes by doing research on the individual states, their agricultural output, their sort of state foods, any iconic dishes that came from there, any famous, food brands or icons, and try to bring those flavors together in something that was, a unique reflection of those states, not just, it's a Philly cheesesteak or, it's Chicago deep dish pizza. I tried to do something that was a little bit more off the beaten path in my research. And again, trying to tell, some history and some context of the culinary evolution and culture of these individual states. So I think, to circle back to Tim, one of the reasons why I think Tim gave me this eggs recipe is because I said, I think I need a hole to be filled in breakfast. So thanks, Tim. I really appreciate the hometown coming in the clutch for me.
Come on, Tim. Now we want to see Tim cook it.
Hey, I mean, I'm sure it could be arranged.
Well,
usually when I do cooking segments, I got to do it with a Republican. So 2 Democrats does not make a bipartisan cooking segment. But hey,
just bring your Republican friend and bring a Democratic friend. That's the only way to get them in the same room, like you said.
True. That's true. And this is my, when I talked about this cookbook on Fox, it was interesting because I mentioned some of the Fox contributors that were in the book, including Donna Brazile, a Democrat, Mike Huckabee, a Republican. And I mentioned them simply because they are Fox News contributors. And a lot of people were, oh my God, not Donna Brazile. And I said, whoa, like on Twitter. And I said, look, guys, you're missing the point. The whole point is you may not like Donna Brazile, but you may like her gumbo. And that's a start. It's a start, to let your guard down, to humanize these elected officials and political figures that, you may not like, but, it's Donna Brazile's mom's gumbo recipe. She represented Louisiana. That's something that everybody can relate to. They have a family heirloom recipe. And so, once I started talking about it a little bit more, people were like, oh, I get it. And so, that's one simple example of what we hope to do with a very simple concept at a time where we're so divided. The news cycle is so negative that this is one uplifting way for us to bring people together and have a little bit of, I guess, joy, happiness, frivolity in these tough times.
And I think that brings up a great point that the name of your cookbook is United We Eat. It's more than a cookbook, am I right?
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, I wrote an introduction that talks a lot about the role of food in politics and campaigning. Many of the recipes that are submitted from the political figures actually are accompanied by anecdotes on how these individuals have used food previously to bring people together and set the table for compromise. Some provide anecdotes about, someone from across the aisle from history that they may want to have, had dinner with if they would have an opportunity to go back in time. So again, it's really trying to tell a larger story through individual experiences that are shared, individual recipes that are shared, and then bringing that all together, as I said, to show that food is a common denominator, but also the storyteller of what it means to be an American. We are very much, multicultural, multi-ethnic nation. And our foods reflect that. They reflect everything from our indigenous roots as a land, all the way to, our very diverse immigrant culture and communities that have come and settled here all across the nation.
Well, and what are give us an idea. You gave us a couple examples of what the recipes were. Give us some other examples of what people can expect recipe-wise, and explain kind of how that approach came about.
Sure. So there are a couple categories, as I said, like any cookbook. So we have breakfast, starters, mains, sides, and desserts. And so
that'd be my areas. Desserts.
Desserts. Mine too. There's actually some really interesting stuff in desserts. I'm a baker. I mentioned pies before. So I was really excited that former Mayor Pete Buttigieg, representing Indiana, submitted his Hoosier pie, the sugar pie, which is very well known as an Indiana staple. We have Amy Klobuchar, who submitted a tater tot hot dish, which is apparently, I did not know this until she tweeted unsolicited, and I almost lost it. She was like, "Go find this cookbook tomorrow. See my award-winning tater tot dish." I'm like, "It's award-winning? Why are you talking about me, Amy Klobuchar? Oh my God!" So she
and the book was coming out the next day.
Huh? Yeah, and it came out the next day. So she tweeted it on a Friday because it came out on the 4th of July. So I was like, "Whoa!" I'll give you one example of one that I adapted for North Carolina, and I always talk about this recipe because it's just so pretty when you look at it in the book. It's Jello salad, or excuse me, Jello salad. So it's basically it's a red Jello ring mold. But it's Pepsi. It's a Pepsi salad. And the reason why Pepsi salad is North Carolina, so it's red Jello made with Pepsi and has black walnuts in it. And I chose this because Pepsi was founded in the late 1800s in North Carolina. Black walnuts are a big producer in a product in North Carolina. So, and Elvis apparently made Pepsi salad very popular, although he's not from North Carolina. But
no, he is definitely not.
but so as I'm just doing this research on different types of things, just trying to, again, I didn't want to do another barbecue, that sort of thing, trying to put these different types of things together. Another pie that I did was an apple pie with cheddar topping and saltine crust for New Hampshire.
Ooh.
And I did that way because both apples and dairy are major agricultural products out of New Hampshire. And saltine crackers, actually soda crackers, are a big thing in New England. So when you think about the sweet and the tart and the salty with the apples, I put that together. So those are just some examples. I mean, we have all kinds of things. California, actually, Ro Khanna from California submitted granola. I know that will make a lot of people laugh. The California's recipe is literally granola.
Okay.
So, Mike Huckabee's was barbecue. I mean, so there's a real variety of recipes. I did a vegan recipe for Hawaii that was a tofu ramen recipe that usually was made with Spam, but I decided to do it with tofu and alter it a little bit. I also did one for Rainier Cherry glazed ginger salmon fillets for Washington State, bringing together the famous salmon of the Pacific Northwest along with the Rainier Cherry. So again, those are some of the examples, trying to bring together those aspects, those stories, those flavors of each individual state to tell our country's story and to bring people together, obviously.
Well, I can tell you from just hearing it, I'm gonna go get that cookbook just because you hear some of these recipes that you've never heard of. Because I mean, I'm Ohio, okay, But when you go to these other states, you don't hear about those types of recipes and the background that you give with the recipe.
That's right. Everything has a context and a story behind it. So, the book is currently available on Amazon. It will be, you can go to our website as well, unitedweeat.com. You can find a link to the Amazon site there to purchase it, either hard copy or on Kindle. But we will be available soon, probably by the end of the summer, at independent booksellers, as well as a number of the other national chains. It is a process. I've learned a lot, in some of the barriers as a first-time author, and my publishers explicitly really, sort of cookbook and food. And so, having to go through the process of demonstrating sales and then sort of getting, we're now getting the distributors to then deal with these other folks that are the independent booksellers and the other sort of chains and that sort of thing. So, some of the major retail, the other chain retail outlets, we're looking for them around October. Because
big difference from running for an office.
Yes and no. There's still a lot of work that needs to be. You have to still. There's a lot of public relations, I guess, involved in this, and I still take it pretty seriously. You got to make sure that people are satisfied and you're meeting their expectations. And so I guess in that respect, that's any job.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's, I've really enjoyed it. It has been a labor of love. It has been a different experience, but a rewarding one for sure.
Well, and I think that brings it that food now, wouldn't that be nice if you could get all 51 or 52 recipes in the guys or girls, ladies and gentlemen, in the same room to cook everything?
That would be awesome. Maybe one of these days, post-pandemic, we'll see, because, we had a lot of different plans, like doing things at both conventions, for example, that obviously are, had to be axed because of the pandemic. So, there's I think a lot of future opportunities to build upon this concept once, things, sort of transcend the new normal and maybe get back to a circumstance where we can have more people in one place safely. I certainly do hope that we can get more people in that room and more people.
Hey, you tell me the names and I will invite them and we will get them on one show, one episode here. I will be happy to do all 50 to 52 people.
Well, get the book and you'll see them all.
Exactly. And get the book and here it is again, everyone. It's United We Eat by Capri Cafaro. It's going to be out there. You can get it at Amazon or at unitedweeat.com. It's coming. It's there. It's 50 to 52 recipes, as she mentioned.
It is actually 50 recipes, but it says 50 recipes to bring us all together. It's 52 to be exact, but 50 states plus the District of Columbia. I guess in our next version, if we come out with a second edition, we will go for Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and Guam. So that's the next round. And
I can only imagine what those tremendous recipes will come in. Just the flavoring that comes out of those areas. Right. So and actually that kind of brings me to a point that you talk about all these people that have supplied a recipe. Republican, Democrat, Independent, no matter who they are, but we still have problems between Republicans and Democrats.
Well, they obviously haven't gotten the cookbook yet. What can I say?
No, they have not gotten the cookbook.
We are in a difficult time. And I don't mean to try to end things on a more sobering note, but I would say that, if we want to combat extreme partisanship, we need to do two major things to reform government. One is redistricting reform, to ensure that gerrymandering does not favor one party or the other so much that whoever the incumbents are, whoever the candidates are more concerned about a challenge within their own party, that they see compromise as a dirty word because they see that as a potential risk to their political career. And then I would also say, obviously, campaign finance reform. People spend too much time, particularly members of the House, having to spend all of their time on the phone raising money and not enough time, working, for the people. And that's not their fault. It's the sad state of affairs on how expensive campaigns are and the environment in which, allows that level of expensive campaign to thrive. So I think those two things are incredibly necessary. And slowly but surely, at least on the redistricting front, with redistricting reform, we're seeing some of that, all across the country, including in Ohio, which won't be implemented until 2022. But and we don't know how successful that will be either. I'm cautiously optimistic, but who knows what that's going to look like. I've already started to hear that people are concerned already, and nothing has happened really yet. So, we're at I think, a critical moment in our nation's history. And we can either use this year, 2020, as a turning point to make our nation better, to make it more compassionate, to make us more invested in our community and our neighbors, or we can go the other way and continue to be more divided, to point fingers and to create a culture of us versus them. I hope we pick the former and not the latter.
Well, and I think that brings up a great point. We talk about what's going on with districting, campaign finance, and some other stuff, and we just found out yesterday, or I'm sorry, today. It feels like it's been forever that there's a big bribery scandal in the Ohio House with the speaker.
Yep.
And $60 million. That's you were in the Senate.
Wow.
I mean, they think it's a $60 million bribe for the House Speaker. And I mean, you were in the Senate, and I mean. And there's what would be going on in someone's mind to do that?
I mean, I was flabbergasted by the amount, by the sheer level of hubris exhibited by both Company A, as it says in the indictment, but we all know is First Energy, and Larry Householder and sort of his band of merry men, that they thought that they could do this and get away with it, and that power and control and money was so important to them that they were willing to risk everything. It's just it turns my stomach, as my grandmother would say. I'm glad to see so many people, Democrat and Republican, calling for the resignation of Speaker Householder. Speaker Householder, as some know, and definitely people in Columbus know, I never served with Householder. He was there before me and he came after me. So he was the speaker in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and then he came back in 2016, in the 2016 election cycle. So I missed him entirely, but I knew him by reputation, and I think most everybody did. And it was not one of integrity. And so I think that on some level, no one is surprised that this is what it's come to with Larry Householder. But the fact that it was able to get this far, the fact that it was able to happen, the fact that somebody that already had a history was able to come back and execute this type of plan, just again, there are really no words for it. I mean, it is a black mark on our state. It is a black mark on the institution of the Ohio General Assembly. And I feel sorry for so many of my colleagues that were not involved that have to now deal with this, and I'm glad to see that my successor in the Senate, Sean O'Brien, introduced the repeal of House Bill 6, which was the core of this issue, that First Energy Company A was advocating to get these these clean energy credits to basically bail out their 2 nuclear power plants. Sean O'Brien didn't vote for House Bill 6 when it came through the Senate, last year. He has now introduced the bill
to repeal it.
I said this to my sister last night when this was going on. I'm like, if I were in the Senate, damn it, I would have already been on the phone being like, we're going to repeal this right now. And so I'm so glad that my senator is the one that did it. And also my former colleague who was a senator and is now in the House, Michael Skindle, who's also the House sponsor of the repeal. I'm glad to see the people are stepping up. There's no ambiguity on where people stand, and that's very important in this moment. I'm the second longest serving member of the Joint Legislative Ethics Committee in the history of the state of Ohio, only surpassed by the founder of the Joint Legislative Ethics Committee, former Speaker Bill Batchelder. And I say that because it's one of my proudest accomplishments as a member of the state Senate. But in that capacity, you really get to know and you really value that integrity in public service. And so I really was feeling for my JLEC colleagues. I know some of them are, still on JLEC. I'm like, we dealt with a lot of sort of nickel and dime stuff when I was there. I can't even imagine what that was like to get that call. But I feel for the leaders right now down there that have to clean up this mess. But I have faith that folks like Sean O'Brien, a Democrat, Larry Obhoff, the president of the Senate, a Republican, and a good friend of mine, originally from Ashtabula. I have faith that these folks are going to be able to clean it up and turn it around. So,
I mean, it's not like it's hundreds of thousands; it's $60 million.
Well, whether it's 6 or 60 million, I mean, it's bad, it's wrong, and it's illegal. Mm-hmm. But my God, I mean, I've never heard, and I think the other part of this that can't be lost on folks is this was a 2.5 year period of time, $60 million in 2.5 years. And again, the hubris, I think, of a multi billion-dollar corporation to be behind this. I mean, it's alleged, it's company A.
Correct.
I want to be careful with, my
word. Proven guilty.
Exactly. You're innocent until proven guilty, but there's only one group that could have benefited from House Bill 6, just one in the state of Ohio.
Pretty much, not multiple. It was just one for one company A.
That's right, for company A, and company A is the only ones that have nuclear power plants, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Well, I isn't there? I didn't build one. No, I can't.
I don't know. I don't got one in my backyard.
No, but I think there's going to be. Even the governor has asked for his resignation.
That's right.
I know stories across the country. Fox picked it up, CNN, and some others have picked it up.
Today had it just like shortly after it broke here locally.
Yeah, and I think, and I talked to several people, and they were. I think people are still stunned to the amount and what actually went on, because I think the group where they talked about 15 or 20 representatives, yeah. So I think there's going to be more coming out down the road, but it's still a shocker.
Well, the U.S. attorney was very clear about the fact that this is an ongoing investigation. Mm-hmm. And while he could only speak to, as he referred to it, the four corners of the indictment, he was very clear that this is an ongoing investigation, that, if you know something, come forward, and that they are not going to stop Democrat or Republican. They're going to allow, the facts to lead them. And I have a great deal of, I think, faith and respect for what I saw at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Ohio, and their FBI colleagues obviously spent a lot of time and put together these pieces that are very much in black and white. If you read the indictment, basically recorded conversations, phone records,
bank, they got it all.
It's not frivolous. And again, as I said, it breaks my heart, because it really does. I never like to see Ohio in a nationwide spotlight like this, but.
Well, and actually the Mahoning Valley has been in the spotlight quite a bit over the last 40 years with the steel mills, the Lordstown plant. Big unemployment now in the area. Yeah. Hopefully we'll come back one day. I mean, people are praying. We'll see what happens.
I always have faith in our community. I mean, we are fighters. Our mascot's named Scrappers for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's because we are resilient, because, we can adapt, but at the same time, we never have given up on our community. And I think that's what makes us special, is that, anybody else might just say, forget it. But when you look at as well, so many success stories that come out of this valley too, it really makes our community unique. So I'm very proud to be 5 generations Trumbull County, And
I'm Trumbull County. I was born. Well, I have to take that back. I was born in
well,
PA.
we were all born at St. E's.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was born in PA, but
Whoa.
I was born in PA. I think but pretty much moved to Warren, Ohio, or Howland Township
Right.
when I was like 3, and lived and pretty much haven't gone. Well, I live in the city of Youngstown now, but I lived at home for 20 some years. So home and grown Trumbull County, if you really look at it that way. But my heart's to the Mahoning Valley.
That's right. The valley is the valley. You know, you gotta love the penguins. You gotta love, the scrappers. You gotta love, everything that this community is about, and all 20,000 of our Italian festivals. Whether it's Mount Carmel, Youngstown Italian Fest, the other Mount Carmel at Niles, the Warren
Briar Hill.
We got them all.
Yeah, I mean. And I think we're very, like you said earlier, and I won't drag that on a little bit, but talk about ethnicity in our area, just Italians, Slovaks. I mean, you name it, it's in Youngstown, Ohio.
That's right. I mean, it's our own little world showcase. As I say, as a big fan of Disney and Epcot Center, you can go around the world in our community, and I think that, we're missing that this summer, obviously, because, I can set my clock any summer by our fairs and festivals. And that was also another, I think, motivator for me with the cookbook, because, being in the community and going to these events all the time as a candidate and later as elected official, you see how these fairs and festivals bring people together. But they're always, you have the Hartford Apple Festival and the Lordstown Apple Festival and the Huntsburg Pumpkin Festival and all these, and the Warren, St. Demetrius Greek Festival and the Greek Festival in Louisville. I mean, and then, we got umpteen ones up in, Ashtabula County as well, Wine and Walleye and Geneva Grape Jamboree and the Grand Valley Festival in Orwell. So you have all these different things that are celebrating both cultures, like Italian, Greek, Slovak, whatever. And then food, whether it's, pumpkin, grape, strawberries, apples, potatoes, whatever it may be. And it just shows how those items, bring a community together, even if it's just for a week or a weekend.
Well, and I think that really is kind of every festival. What do they have? Food.
That's right.
And the book turned out great from what I've read and what I've seen, and I commend you for it.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy. You up for a little Q&A?
Sure.
So here's our first question. The first question is from Chris. He says, were you able to make all of those recipes and taste them? Which one is the best? Oh,
that's a really good question. And I was not able to make them all for a couple different reasons. One, as we were finalizing them, we started it was at the beginning of March. So it limited some of the stuff. So I would be going back and forth. We had with the cookbook publishers, because they're cookbook specific, they have recipe testers that have to work through them all. So I would go back and forth with them. And so if we had to adjust recipes, that at least I did, we would work together on that aspect. There were certain things that I couldn't necessarily make, like cactus. And I don't have a smoker, so I didn't do any of those. But I would have to say that, as far as a favorite is concerned, it's hard to say, because they're all so different. I just recently did the muffins for Oregon, which are pear chai spiced muffins for Oregon, and those are actually quite good. So I'll say I will give those as my favorite for today, but that doesn't mean I won't change my mind tomorrow. So I've done most of them, but there are certainly some that I couldn't do because I was limited either from being able to access those ingredients at the time, or because I didn't actually have the actual thing. But most of those came from the other folks, if you will, that submitted the recipes. I did do Michael Steele's 10-layer cake, and I actually did it on television.
Oh,
that was really interesting. That takes a very long time. That's also real. That's an incredible. I'll give you the Smith Island 10-layer cake from Maryland. 2 thumbs up for that, but it takes 3 hours.
We're gonna do down in September. We're gonna get you back on, and we're gonna pick a couple different ones, and we're gonna do live cooking.
I can do it. I've done live cooking already on Zoom, so
And
I'm
we're
ready.
going to do it. And we're going to take, what we'll do is we'll take some examples or some suggestions from the audience or from the
Absolutely.
people and see what we can come up with and see what we can actually do, depending where we are pandemic wise.
Right. Absolutely.
So, okay, next question. Oh, this will be a good one. This one's from Nick. Will you ever run for office again?
Never say never. I mean, but right now that is certainly not on my agenda. I certainly am not going to rule it out. I very much believe in public service. I very much dislike politics. I've always kind of been like that. I'm a policy person at heart. I'm glad that I have an opportunity to stay involved in my community through YSU and the Girard Multi-Gen Center and the Ohio Association of Free Clinics and Someplace Safe and, Beatitude House. I mean, I'm very involved. And, I'm trying to keep my policy chops sharp as well through my academic work, but it's certainly not top of mind, but I am certainly not ruling it out. Tomorrow or the next 2 years, unlikely, but you never know what the future will hold.
Or in an hour if a politician.
I literally hate to give that answer because it sounds like I'm being a coy politician, but I legit mean it because I am really I'm not sure. I don't see it in the cards anytime soon, but I don't know if circumstances change, if I'll change my mind.
It's one of those things like in an hour, a politician may do the wrong thing and you're like, what are you doing? And you're like, I need to run for that.
I mean, if I haven't done that already, I mean, given the challenges of the state of just the world right now. No, I mean, look, it's not just about wanting to run. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it. And right now, I mean, I just don't see it in my immediate future. But as I said, I don't know what 5-10 years down the road will hold.
Okay. And this will be the last question. Do you plan? I think you might have answered this, but I'll read it to you anyway. Do you plan on doing a United We Eat 2, and what would that entail inside it?
So the answer to that is yes. It is likely that United We Eat second edition would have, as I said, Guam, Puerto Rico, our territories, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and who am I missing? I'm blanking. Puerto Rico. I think with the U.S. Virgin Islands,
Guam,
American Samoa, and I think there's the U.S. Marshall Islands as well. We would certainly want to cover the territories if we do a United We Eat. Now, I've also thought about doing United We Rock for charity as well. So I'm giving portion of this to Feeding America. I was thinking about doing another cookbook with, music folks submitting recipes and doing that for charity. Who knows if I can pull that off or not? I have some relationships that might be able to get it, but I don't know. So that's one that's in my head too. And then the other one that I'm thinking about doing is doing something similar, but for Canada. I'm a huge fan of Canada. So I'm thinking about calling it More Than Maple, a love letter to Canadian cuisine that would cover, sort of the history of the food and culture of Canada through the provinces and that sort of thing and the territories there, which would be a fun little project for me. I don't know if anybody else would care about it at all. But so bottom line is that this will not be the last cookbook you see from Capri Cafaro.
And that's good to hear because the first one, I guess, is turning out to be phenomenal.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, it makes me hungry. It makes me want to go snack and do that. But I think I want the 10-layer cake.
Oh, serious business. The Smith Island 10-layer cake is serious business, and I highly recommend it. If you don't want to spend all that time, you can still get the book, but you can also get Smith Island 10-layer cake online directly from Maryland from Goldbelly. I just saw this. This is not a Goldbelly advertisement, but apparently you can actually order Smith Island 10-layer cake directly from Maryland and have it delivered to you.
Well, that's like the old Briar Hill pizza. They would ship it anywhere in the world.
And handles.
Handles. Yes, that is correct, people. If you specific stores, Handles ice cream is one of the biggest ones. Briar Hill Pizza, they will ship it to wherever you want to go in the world. Maybe not the world, I know the United States.
Well, it's always good to know. I actually didn't know they would ship Briar Hill pizza specifically. I mean, I do know like Handles and Goran's. I mean, I got Goran's shipped to me for Easter. So, but I did I'm gonna have to look this up now.
That was when the old Avalon was there.
Ah,
The old Avalon.
yeah,
back in the day.
Yeah.
I don't know if they do it. I've heard they do it, but I'm not specific. But I know back then.
Look it up.
Yeah, get it shipped to DC. I'm like, I ordered a pizza. It'll be here tomorrow.
Crazy for it in New York, so I'm gonna have to find this. But if it exists, we're gonna have to know about it.
Yes, we're definitely. Capri, it's always a pleasure.
You too, Tony. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining me tonight. You're always welcome on my podcast to announce or just talk politics.
This is awesome. This is such a cool concept and a great format as well. Very, very professional.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Check out other podcast interviews and videos at Anthony Spano, anthonyvspano.com. Thank you, everyone. God bless.